hop into the main slate. If anybody has questions, fire them off. I will get to them probably at the end of the show and knock them all out. So let's get into it, man. We've got first game, Detroit versus Chicago. Detroit oh man. So there is news with this one. Detroit, this line will probably continue to move, maybe even get some reverse movement on it. Detroit currently 4-point dogs. Let's see. They the game has a 37 total. Very not interested in it. David Blau, Blough, David Blow. I'm not sure how you say his name. Purdue rookie, believe he was traded for like a conditional 2020, like 3,005 year draft pick. And I think it's a 2022 7th rounder from Cleveland sometime in the preseason. Don't know why. I hope they're happy with it. Was a pretty meh producer in college, averaged like under 7 yards per attempt in his career. Never topped 37, just topped 3,700 yards once. Threw 25 touchdowns, 10 picks his final year. Very middling quarterback at a Big Ten school. Not very interested in him. He's only 4,200, but I don't think you need the salary this week because Anthony Miller, great play. I can answer your questions. Bob just tweeting. Yeah, Bob, everybody sends me their questions. Yeah, so not really interested in 4,200, but you don't need the savings because like Anthony Miller's a great savings guy. If you're not going up to Jared Cook, all the tight ends are cheap. Bears defense. Yeah, so I guess that's where we'll start. The chalk of the chalk this week is going to be Bears defense. I mean, it's just an egregious price, even if you knew they were playing Jeff Driscoll. They're 2,500 on DraftKings. I think they're the best play, but defense is so random that in cash, if you're playing cash this week, totally, they're a good play. If you're playing tournaments, you just fade the chalkiest of the chalk defense. Like I'm looking at them projecting close to half the field on them. They're not 50-50 odds to be the best value to be in the winning lineup. So instant fade when you see that kind of ownership. Anthony Miller with Taylor Gabriel out, Ben Broniker out. Going to see a lot of targets for Allen Robinson, Anthony Miller. Anthony Miller, I believe, is 3,900. One of the better values, but the same thing. When you get a guy who's going to approach 50% ownership and there are a lot of paths to him busting or players out producing him, you just kind of, I'm totally fine with fading the Anthony Miller chalk, especially in a game that is so ugly with a 37 total. Like Atlanta later in the week or later in the day has an implied team total of 21 that is higher, even though they are not the favorites in their own game, higher than the Bears. So for the Bears, Trubisky is fine, but I think I'd only be stacking him with one because you can get rushing touchdown. He had, I believe it was a season high in rush attempts last week with 7. So you can run Trubisky, and I just run him with 1. I also know that the air yards by low model has Anthony Miller. He's been getting a lot of targets lately. So I think the interesting play would just be to run Trubisky, Anthony Miller, and then move on from the Bears. Maybe run it back with Kenny Golladay, who has like slate breaking upside, even with David Blau, I hesitate to say. And it's going to be like one of the lowest owned high salary players. Like he'll probably be much lower owned than John Brown and Allen Robinson around the same price range. Very interesting tournament play. I'll probably be over the field on him by a significant margin. And I'm not as confident in Marvin Jones, but the same can be said for him. You need 2 long balls to either of those guys. And interestingly, Marvin Hall headed to IR has I think he has 5 catches of over 30 yards this season. He has like 10 targets, but man, they throw him some banging throws. So I am fine with like giving a small boost to either Marvin Jones and or Kenny Golladay because of his absence. On the backfield side, not playing Dave Montgomery, incredibly inefficient, isn't a workhorse back by any means because of Tariq Cohen. And on the other hand, Tariq Cohen, I think a much better play. He's getting a decent amount of carries. Even like in the past 2 weeks, they basically just run him on over half the snaps, and they're just so depleted in their weapons. They have to be getting him out there pretty often. And he also has 15 targets. Man, he has 15 targets and 15 carries in the past 2 games. That is good workload for anybody on this slate, let alone a guy who's so incredibly efficient. We've seen him break slates before. I'm sure he'll do it again at some point. Is this the week? I think it's a fine week to bet on that, especially with such a small slate. The Detroit side, I'd only be looking at Bo Scarborough. Scarborough, like this Derrick Henry light style player. He's like 6'1", super built, and one of the better athletes at the running back position. 32 carries in his past 2 games. Only problem is he has 1 target, and they are underdogs. But it is possible with David Blau under center that they just try and establish that run, man. It's not the greatest way to play football, but when you have David Blau under center, I understand. So, and also Jeff Driscoll averages like 5 or 6 carries a game, 40 rushing yards a game. He's averaging like 7 yards a carry. He is a significant rushing threat that eats into the running backs on his own team. So I think David Blau starting is probably a really interestingly good thing for Bo Scarborough. I will be overweight on Scarborough as well. The tight end side, TJ Hawkinson is a fine play. He's expected, like he's probable, I believe, at this point. He might be listed as questionable where you're looking, but all signs point to him playing. He just has not gotten the, like, he's been inefficient and not getting a ton of volume ever since Stafford went out. And really, he hasn't done much at all since his week 1 explosion. Has not topped 60 yards since then. Has more gains of under 10 yards than he has over 50, than he has over even like 35. So not playing him. On the other side, interesting spot with like Jasper Harstead, a former receiver at one of the Ivy League schools, but it's probably too thin of a play. Let's move on. Our next game we have Buffalo versus Dallas. It's pretty clear where you want to go with these. Dallas 7-point favorite at home, 46 total. It's moved up 1.5 points. Yeah, Dallas is a pretty concentrated offense. I think you're going to get Tre'Davious White probably on Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup. I mean, just the entire Dallas offense is well underpriced. I think that's probably where I'll be going in cash is Dak Prescott. Drew Brees projected for more points, but not enough to, like, Dak Prescott is the 4th highest priced quarterback on a slate with 6 starting quarterbacks. It's not very good pricing. So he's my cash game quarterback if I'm playing any cash. Don't know if I will this week, but he's a very solid play. I think Amari Cooper is probably a very good tournament play, but I don't know. His ownership is actually pretty high. Maybe maybe go Michael Gallup and like a Randall Cobb as a very solid pivot. Both of them, like obviously Cobb coming in at lower projection of ownership, Michael Gallup as well, obviously lower projection of ownership. But really, Michael Gallup, I believe in the games he has started or the games he's played because he missed 2 or 3 games early in the season, has a higher target market share than Amari Cooper. Like he is like basically like it's probably a Chris Godwin, Mike Evans type situation. And I'll just bet on the ownership. Like just give me reverse ownership every single time we get that situation to come up. So I think he's a very interesting play. Tight ends, your ceiling is so capped when you play Jason Witten, and even when you just have no floor when you play Blake Jarwin, and even your ceiling is like a 20-yard touchdown, which would probably be good on this slate, but I think the odds of him actually scoring are so low. No tight ends. Zeke underpriced as well, 7,400. He's averaging 20-some carries a game, I'd imagine, especially since the first few weeks where they worked him back in slowly. I think he's another, it's easy to jam in Zeke, Kamara, Michael Thomas, and cash. So getting Zeke in, and I think as a large home favorite, I think he's a solid tournament play. You just kind of have to eat the chalk with him. The interesting decision point to make is in tournaments, you really can't be running all 3 of those players. It's just you're going to get a duplicated lineup even if you win whatever tournament you're entering. So I think I'd probably look to fade Alvin Kamara, but we'll talk about him later. Bill side, John Brown always in play. Dawson Knox not getting a ton of volume, but all he needs to do is stumble into the end zone, similar to TJ Hawkinson, but cheaper. I like him more than Hawkinson. Cole Beasley, the revenge game narrative is strong. Cole Beasley going back to Dallas, I think probably for his first time, but either way, you love some Cole Beasley revenge, but realistically, I'm just going to John Brown. Then finally, Devin Singletary. Singletary got like 21 carries last week, out-touched Frank Gore, and he's been their receiving game back for the entirety of the season for the most part. I think he got hurt at one point, but when he plays, he's the receiving game back. As big underdogs, that works to his favor, I'd say. So yeah, that's where I'd be going. Let's see, next game. Oh man, next game, Falcons Saints. Play all the dudes in this game. Drew Brees, the highest projected quarterback. I think Matt Ryan will initially have a low-ish ownership projection relative to Dak and Brees. But people are going to late swap will be the interesting thing, especially if you're playing at any decent amount of stakes. If you're losing and you get like kind of beat up in the first game, you're going to probably swap, especially if you get beat up by the first 2 games. Going to get a lot of ownership on Matt Ryan from people late swapping. So early in the week, I think he projects as a very solid, interesting play at home, solid game script, like negative, but still a lot of scoring. I'd much rather just run like Dak or Breeze and run one-offs of the Falcons offense. You can play Julio Jones. He's 7,300 for due to his talent, but his like target share has been lower this season than many years prior, maybe like ever, honestly. So he won't really be in my mix. I understand it, but he also said earlier today that like he doesn't know how his shoulder is going to hold up once he gets hit. That's not like a dude I want to play. So I'll be over the field on Calvin Ridley as it's hard to really have any faith in Julio. Julio would be my preferred late swap option if I get dusted in the early 2 games, because he is going to be low owned with what I think is for good reasons, but that still makes him a solid late swap. Michael Thomas is my favorite chalk to eat. Don't know how you could possibly get off of him. 16-point DraftKings floor all season, better than McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, any of those guys in terms of his actual floor that we've seen. So Russell Gage, interesting out of the slot. I think he's fine. Jaden Graham will be like the only active tight end. I mean, I'm sure they'll call somebody up, but he'll be the only tight end that was like active in the past few weeks. Caught a nice 53-yarder. He's gotten 2 targets in each of the past 2 games, but really it's because they have nobody else to go to. He's going to be on the field for most of the time. So I like him in that spot. I think he's one of the better punt options, at least. Other than that, probably moving off this game. Oh, Devonta Freeman expected to return as well. I think he logged at least a semi-practice, if not a full practice. He's going to play, and I think we've seen enough of Ryan Hill to know that the dude's pretty much trash. And I think Devonta Freeman in negative game script, he's had multiple games of like 5+ targets. He's a very interesting, sneaky tournament play, coming in projected low ownership than Montgomery, who I like him more than Cohen, who I like him more than. He's probably like my 4th running back on the slate. So I think, and his ownership won't reflect that. It'll probably be closer to 5 or 6. And on a small slate like this, that's really what matters. So that is the Thanksgiving Day slate. Let's hop into the regular slate with, yes, one of my favorite games, Jacksonville versus Tampa Bay. Jacksonville are 1-point home dogs, which is actually reversed. They opened as 1-point favorites. The total has come down 1.5 to 47.5. I'm still interested in this game. If the total continues to drop, I will probably move off of it. But in the past 2 weeks, we've seen the emergence of Chris Conley. He's 2nd on the team in targets, 2nd on the team in air yards, only behind DJ Chark. And against a Tampa Bay pass funnel, I think it's a really good tournament option. You just buy quarterbacks in good spots, which this is with the 2nd highest total of the main slate, especially the ones that are going to be low owned. You buy the low ownership good quarterbacks because that makes for great stacks. So that's where I'll go on that side. Probably not interested in Leonard Fournette running up against like the 2nd best rushing defense in terms of fantasy points allowed, I believe. They have a solid defensive line, especially when it comes to stopping the run. On the other side, for me, it's probably only Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. I prefer Mike Evans because I think we're going to get higher ownership on Chris Godwin. But both are fine. They have 8 combined games of 28 points or more, I believe. That's 3/4 of the season. That's actually a little more than 3/4 of the season. It's like 8 out of 11. So picking the right one is always hard. I tend to go with the cheaper one or the lower owned one. I think both of those will be Mike Evans this week. Ronald Jones still splitting work with Peyton Barber. Interesting tournament run back, but probably not something I will be doing. Next game, we have the New York Giants. Giants are 6.5-point home dogs against the Packers. Packers, I'm mostly looking to Devontae Adams, although I have Jamal Williams, actually, of all players, projected as a very good value just because he's averaging like double-digit carries and multiple targets per game. Like he has moved into the receiving back role, and he's, I want to say, hovering around 4,500. On the off chance that Aaron Jones gets hot and they play him over Jamal Williams for a large portion of the game, I don't think he's a player I'm considering for cash, but he'll be like one of my highest leverage tournament plays. And Devontae Adams, just that dude, gets all the passing game work for the team. He has like 4 straight games of double-digit targets, and when those come from Aaron Rodgers against the Giants defense, yeah, give me all that. Probably off Saquon Barkley. it's this Giants offense has just completely crushed him, which is unsurprising because that's what happens when you're running back in the NFL. If you play on a good offense, you're going to be good for the most part. And if you don't, it's going to be tough sledding. So Darius Slayton, probably the only guy I'd run on the Giants just because if I ran multiple Packers, like I could see a Jamal Williams, Devontae Adams stack, going to have to run it back with somebody, and Slayton has broken slates before. And he gets a lot of deep balls, and he is really efficient at catching those deep balls. So Slayton, probably a guy I'd look to if I'm running it back. Won't be super heavy on this game, though. Next game, another meh one. Bengals at home, 3.5-point dogs to the Jets. Jets are on a heater right now with, I believe, 3 wins in a row. Stomped Oakland last week. If there were a Le'Veon Bell bounce back, because I think he has like one game of over 20 points, and he just barely cleared it. Let me see if I can find it. But yeah, if there were a bounce back, it would be against just the worst team in the NFL by a wide margin. They are so bad. It's unbelievable. And I think all Jets are viable, although I'd be looking to maybe run a Robbie Anderson out just because I think he has, as always, the highest tournament ceiling. Probably not stacking just because, like we saw last week, the Bengals are very incapable of putting up points, which makes the other team not really have to do much to put up points either. And the only reason I think I have like any trepidations with Le'Veon Bell is we've seen them work in their backups. I want to say it's been mostly below Powell, but we've seen them work in their backups. We've seen him get vultured at the goal line. Like last week, it was a play action to Ryan Griffin, I believe. Yeah, in the past 3 weeks, Bilal Powell has almost 20 carries, and he has 2 targets in each of the past 2 weeks. Still think it's a fine spot for Le'Veon Bell. Andy Dalton starting on the Bengals side. Interesting to think about. I want to say he's like 4,700. And anytime you get a starting quarterback who's going to throw 35 to 40 times at a minimum, really. It's interesting. I just think Lamar Jackson is the GOAT, and he's the best value at almost any – really, he's the best value at any position on the slate. So if for some reason you wanted to get off of Lamar Jackson in cash, it'd be Andy Dalton for me. He's gone over 18 points over 18 points, 6 of 8 games he's played, but it's Lamar Jackson. I would stack Dalton, Tyler Boyd if you wanted to. Joe Mixon as an underdog, not getting a ton of receiving game work because of Gio. Not my cup of tea. Next game we have is the Colts versus the Titans. Colts 2.5-point home favorites. They are going to be without Eric Ebron on IR, without Paris Campbell, as far as I know, without Marlon Mack. And T.Y. Hilton said he was this like his calf or his hamstring or whatever. Are those the same thing? Yeah, he said his leg tightened up in the last game, and he doesn't know how much weight he can put on it if he's going to be able to play this week. When you sap T.Y. Hilton's speed, I'm not interested in him. I think Zach Pascal would be the guy I'd look to if he doesn't play. And, if he does play, I think he's probably more of a decoy or at least like a shell of himself because speed is really what gets him going. Hey, welcome to the show. It's just me this week. Bobby's out right now dealing with guests. So you're just watching me. Thanks for tuning in. What game was I on? I was on Tennessee side. I think it is a sharp thing to just only play Derrick Henry when he's a home favorite. This week he's on the road as a dog. I don't think he's caught over 3 passes at any point this season. Not really looking to him. Ryan Tannehill, I'm a firm believer that he's not that good, and the Indy defense has been pretty good. This is probably one of my least favorite games to look at, honestly. So I'd be looking at A.J. Brown over Corey Davis. Jonnu Smith not going to, even though he'll get the start again because Laney Walker on IR. Just a pretty boring pace down game, in my opinion. Oh, I guess on the Indy side, Jonathan Williams would be an interesting play. I could see you getting to him, although his price did get a little bit more pricey. I want to say he's like 5,300. So I think he's a solid value. Don't necessarily think you need to play him, and I'd be a bit concerned with his receiving game work. Got 3 targets last week and caught all of them. Only went for 17 yards. So more of a between the tackles grinder, but as a favorite at home, got 26 carries last week, and he's a favorite at home, like I said, this week. I think he's fine. He's actually a pretty solid play. 100-yard bonus in back-to-back games as well. If you're telling me a dude gets 20 carries and 2 targets at 5,300, I think it's a good tournament play, but his receiving game is going to probably keep me off of him in cash, depending on I think there's just a decent enough value on the slate that you can pass him over in cash. Next one, Christian McCaffrey and the Carolina Panthers are 10-point favorites versus Washington. I'm really not considering playing anybody on Washington. Dwayne Haskins a little beat up right now, but as if it mattered, he's like one of the least. He is, I think, the least efficient quarterback in the league, averaging like under a 5 adjusted yards per attempt. And really, it's even sapping like Terry McLaurin. So just make it a point to not play players with a 15 implied team total. And on the other hand, I'm not awfully interested in Panthers outside of McCaffrey either. DJ Moore, an absolute stud. I want to say he's like 5th in the NFL in receiving yards. Not awfully surprising. Has one of the highest breakout ages in college dominators. The percentage of his team's, his college team's offense that he controlled. Like, he's a generational talent. I throw that word around as a meme a lot. This is not that case. He's actually just one of the best receiver prospects I've seen in a long time, and it's panning out. But because this is such a boring game in terms of Washington really has no chance at contending with Carolina's solid defense and Washington's awful offense, don't really care too much. McCaffrey, though, leading the league in yards from scrimmage, touchdowns, total touches, just everything you could possibly imagine for a running back. Right on pace to, I believe, have the second most yards from scrimmage ever. Probably on pace for like a top 20 to 25 touchdown season all time as well. 10.5. DraftKings just gave up. They threw their hands up in the air and said, you're going to play him at any price. Make him 10.5. Why did they do that? I don't know. But keep playing him. I just can't imagine not playing McCaffrey in cash. It's McCash free is what you should be calling it. Next game, San Francisco versus Baltimore. Baltimore are 6-point home favorites. Total in this game, honestly, not surprisingly to me, has moved up from 45.5 to 47. I mean, yeah, you've got two of the better, really maybe the best offense in the league in Baltimore against a very solid offense as well in San Francisco, with all their weapons back, with George Kittle, Emmanuel Sanders healthy, Deebo Samuel healthy. Don't know if Matt Breida is playing. I don't think he is. I'm not 100% sure. Don't really care in terms of their offensive production. And Raheem Mostert's going to fill into his role just fine if he doesn't play. Probably not playing Tevin Coleman as a road underdog by a pretty massive margin. I do think George Kittle, many players don't, I can say defense doesn't matter for many players, Lamar Jackson being one of them, George Kittle being another. So I think Lamar Jackson to Mark Andrews probably, or Marquise Brown, both are fine. And then run it back with George Kittle is a great way to attack this game. Emmanuel Sanders and Deebo Samuel, more of secondary options, and I would need to be playing a full-on game stack of this one. And given how much of the just total scoring equity you can get with Lamar Jackson, I don't think you need to go heavy on the stacks. An interesting stack that I doubt few people are going to play is Lamar Jackson with Mark Ingram, and we saw it pan out on, what was it, Monday night? That Monday Night Football? Yeah, it's this offense can just put up so many points that it doesn't really, the negative correlation that you get with quarterback, running back, and running quarterback with their running back in terms of just the market share of rushes kind of dissipates when you score so many points. And your team's just fine. Your team runs the ball so efficiently as well. They're a great rushing offense. They're leading the league by hundreds of yards in total rushing yards. So Lamar Jackson in cash, I think I'd probably still be overweight on in the tournaments. I really hope people think that the San Francisco 49ers are going to be able to stop them. We saw them play New England. Defense doesn't matter a ton in terms of making projections and it actually bearing out on the field. And it definitely doesn't matter with Lamar Jackson. So that's probably all I have on this game. Let's hop into our next game. Philadelphia versus Miami. I think another great tournament spot. Miami 10-point home dogs, 45-point totals come down a point. Miami, it's pretty clear to me. I'm not playing any Kalen Ballage. Believe on the amount of touches he's had or the amount of carries. He is the most inefficient running back in the past decade or something in terms of just raw yards per carry. Not the greatest stat. Doesn't help that he plays on an awful team, but even the running backs around him throughout the season have outproduced him. So very clearly a very bad NFL football player. Get this dude to the XFL ASAP. Patrick Laird just doesn't I think he was outscored by Myles Gaskins last week. It just not going to see enough volume from any of the non-Kalen Ballage guys, and Kalen Ballage is bad. They lost Jakeem Grant, I believe, to IR with a leg injury. He was carted off. It was pretty clear he wasn't going to be coming back this season. Albert Wilson may also end up on IR, but he's definitely not playing this week. I think it's a rib injury. So that really leaves Devontae Parker and Mike Gesicki as the two established options. I think both of them are great run backs with your Eagles stacks. Allen Hurns probably too thin of a play. I'm just going to take the secured volume with one of the two other options I just mentioned. And Philly, coming off of back-to-back awful games, Carson Wentz looks like dust, but really that's just the time to capitalize on low ownership. When you get Carson Wentz in a great spot with a very high 27.5 implied team total against Miami, a bottom 3 or 4 passing defense just gets shredded by everybody they play. And the options are pretty clear. I think you can stack them. I'd probably look to double, maybe even triple stack. The triple stack worked out swimmingly last week. I believe it was in the optimal lineup, the best lineup you could possibly create last week. It was Baker, Nick Chubb, Odell, and Jarvis Landry. Maybe not Odell, but that was like the Millie Maker. That was at least the Millie Maker winning lineup, or any of the large tournaments. That was basically how you did it. It could happen again this week, and Miles Sanders actually gets a lot of receiving game equity. Past 2 weeks, they have thrown to their running backs. Philly has 9 times. Every single one has gone to Miles Sanders. Only has about 60% of the team's carries, but when you get that much receiving game work, I really think he's viable for cash despite burning us. It's just you jam in your guys against Miami in cash, especially when you're going to get them pretty cheap. Zach Ertz, as always, number 1 projected tight end on no, Travis Kelce had him actually, but number 2 projected tight end, and really the gap between the two isn't awfully far off. I kind of I'll probably still take Travis Kelce, but Zach Ertz in your stacks, he would be my priority. Getting now Nelson Aguilar and Alshon Jeffrey back, it looks like Alshon is fine. He was getting a lot of targets early in the season. Nelson Aguilar, very bad at football. Another guy in this game. Don't play him, man. Not very good. Next game we have on the slate, Cleveland versus Pittsburgh, a 39-point total. Pittsburgh announced that Devlin Duck Hodges will be their starting quarterback. Mason Rudolph was very bad, but he was their third string. Duck Hodges is their third string quarterback for a reason. I think he's probably a small upgrade, but I don't think we'll see Juju this week, but it remains to be seen. He's still dealing with a knee injury, although he did clear concussion protocol. If he does play, I'm playing none of them. I think you'll just see such low amounts of passing game work relative to the amount Pittsburgh's going to want to rush as a small home dog with a very talented defense against a turnover and sack-prone Browns offense. Benny Snell last week with James Conner out, and looks like he's going to be out again this week. 21 carries, I think like Kareth White or something like that was their second in carries at 6. They've completely phased Jalen Samuels out. Got a handful of targets last week and like 2 or 3, I believe it was 2 carries. So Jalen Samuels is pretty much done. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if you could just cut him from your fantasy rosters. And I think as a home dog by only 1 point, I would be looking probably to Benny Snell over Jonathan Williams. But I don't know. Both are, I guess Benny Snell at 600 cheaper for probably the exact same volume is just why I'd be going Snell. And I also really like running it back in tournaments, at least, with the Steelers defense. Top 3 in sacks, top 3 in turnovers forced. And the Browns are like bottom 5 or 10 in both those metrics as an offense as well. Even despite turning it around in recent weeks, going into Pittsburgh against a really good defense, I think that's a very good stack. We move into the 4 p.m. slate. First game on the slate, Arizona versus Los Angeles. Los Angeles 3-point road favorites against Arizona, a 47.5-point total. It's come up a 1.5. That is a very solid indicator that you're going to want to play all of your Kyler Murray. We saw, like, obviously Lamar Jackson is the front runner for MVP, and no one's going to stop him. But we saw what a talented rusher and passer can do against the Rams and just shredded them. Kyler probably won't do that, but he doesn't really have to pay off his value, obviously. A bit more expensive at quarterback. I think people, if they're playing the pay up at quarterback game, are going to look, Jackson at 7 and then Patrick Mahomes at 7.4 are going to be much more popular than Kyler Murray at 6.4. Makes him an interesting tournament pivot, but just the value is definitely not as good as the other two in cash. Running with Christian Kirk, I think you can also run Kenyon Drake, who's been getting the bulk of the team's work in recent weeks. David Johnson, completely done, has like 7 touches in the past 3 games. Really disappointing to see such a good player be hampered by what I assume is injuries, but maybe he's just was never as good as we always thought. I honestly don't know, but definitely don't play him. Another guy you can probably cut from your season-long teams with Chase Edmonds, probably coming back this week, but if not, he comes back next week and probably should at least take away that second running back role for the team. Outside of that, not looking to, I think it's single stack is fine. I would probably just run it back with one of the receivers on the other side. It's really anybody's guess. I still think Cooper Kupp, probably the most talented receiver, definitely going to get the most volume. Last week, I want to say he had like 10 targets. Robert Woods up there as well. I don't think I'm really running a ton of Brandon Cooks, especially maybe an interesting option is to run, which was a Millie Maker winner a few weeks ago, Christian Kirk and Arizona defense. Arizona generates a decent amount of pressure. Chandler Jones leads the league in sacks at like 12.5. And Jared Goff is like the worst quarterback against pressure. He's so bad. He has no clue what to do. He's not that good anyways, but man, put him under pressure and just, dude ain't good. So possibly get some turnovers there, some sacks with Chandler Jones. And Christian Kirk and the Cardinals defense are very highly correlated just in terms of what we've seen in the past. Their correlation is pretty high. So maybe that's an interesting way to attack it as well. No Todd Gurley for me. Dude hit like a season low. He's done too. He's still startable in season long, I guess, but hardly. Next game. Second to last game of the slate we have is actually, I'll jump to this one real quick. Denver, 3-point home dogs versus the Chargers, 3-point favorites, obviously, 38.5-point total. Who cares, really? As a home, I don't know. At home, Philip Lindsay, interesting play, but he projected as a good value last week, and it's just when your offense is run by Brandon Allen, it's not going to produce enough points to really make any of your players good tournament plays. Noah Fant gets a lot of work, has gotten a lot of work at least since Emmanuel Sanders left, but he's been wildly inefficient, definitely in part because of Brandon Allen. He has, what is this, 19, 18, like 28 targets in his past 4 games, I believe, if I'm doing the math right. But I think he's a fine one-off in this game, maybe running back with like Mike Williams or Keenan Allen, both of whom, the offense is pretty concentrated around. In terms of the passing game, it's just them and Hunter Henry. Some Austin Eckler sprinkled in, but since he lost the starting role, unjust, lost the starting role to a lesser player in Melvin Gordon, he hasn't been getting quite as much work. It's probably mostly off this game. If you can avoid games with totals under 39, you do it. Final game of the slate. Kansas City at home, favored by 10 against Oakland. Oakland has like the bottom 4 passing defense in yards per attempt allowed. I want to say it sits right around 8 somewhere, 8 yards per attempt, which is very bad. And Kansas City, obviously, second best or best offense in the league compared to Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. Both of, you just want to center your fantasy lines around these teams. Tyreek Hill at like 8,900, very expensive, not a great value, but I think that makes him a very solid tournament play. And by playing him and Mahomes, you are not running Christian McCaffrey. You're not running you're probably not running like any of the other high-priced players because it's just so difficult to that's $1,600 of your salary locked into 2 players. So I think that's a very interesting build. And we've seen both of these, like Tyreek Hill had multiple like 50-point games last season. Pretty easy for Mahomes to hit 30. So I think it's an interesting tournament stack, but the value isn't there for cash. Travis Kelce, it's been a difficult season for Kelce relative to last season, but he's still getting the volume. He hasn't gone under 7 targets. He's gone under it once this season, has at least 4 catches in every game. It's been like a pillar of consistency and has hit the 100-yard bonus once. Kind of Zach Ertz-esque in a way where a player is getting the volume and just hasn't like spiked. I actually think makes him an interesting play as well, but I'm not running him with Tyreek Hill because he's 7,200. And for both of them to hit, let's call it 4x, which is what you're probably looking for to win a tournament, to hit like 28 from Kelce and what's like 36. Yeah, there's no way, but it's very, very, very unlikely that Kelce and Hill go for like a combined 60 points 60 points. So definitely not doing that. I'd rather run it back with Darren Waller since Hunter Renfrow started having a little mini breakout about 5 weeks ago. Over that span, Waller averaged like 3 catches for 40 yards. Before that, he was averaging somewhere just north of 7 catches for 80 yards. And I think we will see that revert to what it used to be because they both run these very similar, like shallow across the middle routes. Renfrow just kind of soaked up that volume. Not playing Josh Jacobs, getting very little passing game work on the road is a massive underdog. Tyrell Williams always in play. I think we had like Damian Williams missed at least a portion of practice. Let me see if I can find anything on this. if basically the rule of thumb is anytime you get the dominant back in the Kansas City backfield, you just take it. Yeah. No, it looks like Williams should play this week. Just took a practice off dealing with a rib injury. If he doesn't play, LaShawn McCoy would just be the absolute dude. I mean, Andy Reid loves that guy. He looks to be still efficient, although, man, got to get him to learn how to hold a football better. So I think he'd probably be a cash game viable as a giant favorite. And I think that's the entirety of the slate. Quiet night, no questions. So I will hop on out of here. You can catch myself at Kyle Tweets here, and I will be joined again by Bobby Gomez Sunday morning. Peace.